Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome back, ye brave group who have quickly done your lunch break. We appreciate you coming back in here, and people are going to be trickling in. So the reminder is just if you're at the top and you find yourself at the side of the aisle, people are going to be trying to squeeze past you as they come back in. So just think about that if you want to scooch over to the middle. That's always great. We are here with an awesome panel on profit with purpose, the new paradigm of sustainable business. So our experts are going to engage in a dialogue exploring how business can strategically utilize finance and legislative measures to fund genuine, impactful solutions throughout capital stack. And this discussion aims to shed light on the intersection of finance policy and purpose-driven strategies and offer some insights into effective funding mechanisms for sustainable business. With that, I will let our moderator, Nina, take it away.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? I don't know if this thing is on or not. Yeah, so I hope everyone had a good lunch. Always good to be the panel right after the lunch break where everyone's like, where's the nap room? But hopefully everyone did have a good lunch. And I just want to say a big shout out to Knut and to Nira and to, the 20 or so people who managed to put this event together. It's really incredible. And a big thank you to all of you in the audience for your interest in sustainability and what we're studying here. So it's kind of interesting, when I was asked to moderate this panel, Profit with Purpose, I was thinking back earlier in my career. Now, currently, I head up corporate ESG strategy and reporting for Nasdaq. And so I lead the team that does all of our sustainability reporting, works on developing our corporate sustainability strategy, reports to the board, engages with all our shareholders. I do all that stuff. And in sustainability strategy, reporting, communications for a very long time. And this topic, Profit with Purpose, took me back almost 20 years to when I had my own business, and PepsiCo was a client of mine. And I was working with them on their very first sustainability report. And the theme of that report was performance with purpose. And that became kind of their iconic sustainability communications platform for a long time. And it's such an important topic, thinking about how we can mobilize capital, whether that's, through financing, whether it's through policy, to be able to drive the sustainable future that we all need. So our panelists today work at the intersection of finance, policy, and purpose-driven strategies, and they've each found paths to delivering effective funding mechanisms for sustainable businesses. So I'm really pleased to have with me today Stephanie Udler and Minjia Yang. And Stephanie, right here, Stephanie is the founder and senior partner at 4800 Partners, which is an impact strategy advisory firm. Stephanie leads the environmental sustainability team, where she guides clients through collaborative, systems thinking approaches to craft bold strategies that intertwine economics, technology, and sustainability to catalyze impact and drive transformation. With over 20 years supporting the public and private sectors in sustainability leadership roles, Stephanie served as an advisor to the head of sustainability at Meta, where she focused on U.S. federal policy, and she led the sustainability and climate change services offering at Booz Allen Hamilton, where she supported U.S. federal agencies with standing up their sustainability programs. So, Stephanie, thank you for joining us today. And then Minjia, down there, is a vice president and head of sustainable finance at the International Well Building Institute, or IWBI, where she leads the thought leadership platform to elevate the meaning of social sustainability strategies across the global investment landscape. Minjia brings her interdisciplinary background in law, economics, finance, and insights of global capital markets and sustainable finance, policy advocacy, and partnership building, as well as environment, social, and governance initiatives. Prior to joining IWBI, Minjia worked at Delos, which is a wellness technology company, and she established over 10 subsidiaries and joint ventures in Asia, as well as the first venture capital fund focusing on wellness technology for the built environment. So thank you both for being here. So we're going to do something a little fun to kick off our panel. We'll do a little quick lightning round. It'll get you to know a little bit more about Stephanie and Minjia. So I'm going to start, Stephanie, with you with our lightning round. So what is your favorite sustainable brand?
That is a good question. Lately, I am really loving Rent the Runway. Love to rent instead of buy. It really does contribute to a sustainable circular economy. And it helps to extend the life cycle of clothing and also reduce waste.
Love Rent the Runway. And Minjia, how about you? What's your favorite sustainable brand?
Well, I would say Grameen Bank because the internship when I was, at a lot of your age in my grad school, that was the first internship at grad school I took to go all the way to Bangladesh to intern at Dhaka and spend time in the village. So that's a bank dedicated to lending microfinance to women, especially women in rural areas in Bangladesh. And it's also a 2006 Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Now, what about, we'll stick with you, Minjia. What is your favorite thing about New York City?
Well, diversity. Diversity in population and diversity in voices, just looking at our audience. I think you all represent that value.
I have two things. So I live in Washington, D.C., took the train here late last night. My first favorite thing about New York City is the food. Coming from Washington, D.C., I miss the pizza, the bagels, all of that. And then also it's an opportunity for me to visit family.
That's terrific. Okay, last lightning round question. Stephanie.
Yes.
Have you read anything good lately that you'd recommend for everyone? What's your favorite book?
Yes. So I recently finished Cobalt Red, which is about the mining industry, the mining of cobalt that is used to make batteries. It is a wonderful, very detailed book. If you do read it, I recommend that you do the audiobook because it goes into a lot of detail. So you can maybe go for a walk and read instead of just laying down, getting depressed. So that's my first one. And then I just started, but I don't have much to report on yet, Higher Ground, which is by Allison Taylor. And I've heard really good things about that as well.
A great book. And Minjia, what about you?
So for me, it's not a new book, but it's an old book that I kept reading again and again. It's a novel called To Live by a Chinese author, Yu Hua. I think sustainability started with the part sustain. So when I think about sustainability, I think about how regulation, how political policy and social cultural environment impact individuals. So that's a really interesting reading. It also reflects, how individuals find peace in turbulent economy, in turbulent policy environment. And also it reflects how the Western modern history impact on Chinese communities to reflect on their own journey.
Turbulent policy?
Very cool. And I have to chime in here because my recent favorite was Jonathan Doerr's Speed and Scale, which is the 10-point plan for battling climate change, which I had my ladies' book club read, and there was general rebellion, but they all ended up reading it and learned a lot, so that was a lot of fun. Okay, now we'll get to the real topic at hand here. So going to our first question. So my company, along with thousands of other companies, are preparing to respond to the EU's new Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which passed back in 2022, also known as CSRD. And since then, double materiality has really taken center stage in sustainability. So Minjia, let's start with you. What is double materiality, and how is it influencing legislation, public policy, and finance globally?
That's a great question because I remember when we were at speaker launch, one student volunteer mentioned, in other conferences she attended, there's a lack of definition. So early on, we're going to address this question. Double materiality, how many of you know the definition? So a majority of you already know the definition. Double materiality looks at both financial materiality, or that singular materiality, and also the impact materiality. So what that means is companies, it's not only necessary for companies to look at how external environmental or societal factors influence their financial performance, but also how they contribute and impact the broader society and the environment. So it's both an inside out and outside in perspective. Now, this can sound very theoretical. Let's go back to where financial materiality just even got started. So, Nina, you mentioned about CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, all those acronyms. But before CSRD, there's a similar document or legislation. So CSRD superseded what's called the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, NFRD. So you can see back then, the EU didn't have this idea solidified of double materiality, or they were like juggling around the term financial materiality or non-financial. But it's not really fair, because when we talk about financial materiality, it's really based on our thinking or the theories in finance and in economics and accounting. So what's reflected in financial statement can easily be justified as financial impact, financial materiality. But a lot of, especially when we look at social dimension in sustainability, a lot of those longer term intangible benefits cannot easily be quantified. So EU figured out this is a challenge, this is a problem. So it's not non-financial, it's just like not easy to be reflected in financial statement to justify your case to your investors. So they kind of changed that non-financial term into impact, because although we don't know how in the short term it's changing your financial performance, but we believe in the longer term it may have significant impact to the financial performance. So it changed to, financial materiality and impact materiality. But I think the core, what's reflected in, different regimes adopting different concepts is also their overall philosophy. Does people matter? Do people matter? Does the environment matter to you? Are they the bottom line? Do you have to intervene? When investors kept asking the question, what's the ROI? What's the business case? Do you intervene to say, this is our human right. Protecting your people, protecting their health, well-being, equity, and building a community that thrive, that's human right. Like, does government choose this stance? So that can be reflected in a lot of recent discussions with the US and even in China. I think it's surprising, but also in a good way to see that not only Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but like 3 stock exchanges across mainland China are proposing mandatory ESG disclosure while adopting a double materiality stance.
So while a lot of the world has adopted double materiality and figured that out, from the US policy perspective, as many of you probably know, the SEC just passed their final climate disclosure rule, and it only includes financial materiality and not double materiality. However, I will add that there have been several pieces of legislation that have passed over the past 3 or 4 years, and they do provide incentives to promote corporations to invest sustainably and to adopt sustainability practices. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But so even though we don't have the financial disclosure piece in the double materiality framework, we do have some other moving pieces that we haven't had in a very long time.
Yeah, so Stephanie, so you mentioned, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission just recently, at the beginning of this month, finally adopting the long-awaited climate disclosure rule that those of us in the business have been sort of anxiously waiting to see what the final rule was going to look like. What are some of the other important local and global sustainability legislations and policies that you follow? And are you seeing regional or global trends and patterns in those disclosures? Requirements?
I'll just touch on some of the U.S. policies and then hand it over to Minjia maybe to do some of the global policies as well. So SEC climate disclosure, I'll just take a few minutes to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that one since it is so important. Here, it focuses on climate disclosure related to climate-related financial risks, Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHG emissions, as well as costs due to severe weather events. It did pass a few weeks ago. It is watered down from the proposed version of the rule. It is not as stringent as in the EU, not just from the double materiality perspective, but from other perspectives as well. Doesn't include Scope 3 emissions, et cetera. But we are still happy to see it. It's been 2 years in the making to see it come through. Now, the other side of the coin is that it is now tied up in lawsuits. So the Fifth Circuit Court just issued a stay on the rule last Friday, I believe it was. So that means they need to halt implementation right now. So we are going to wait and see what happens with that. Deep breath, Nina. It's okay. It's okay. We're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. I know. And then going back to the other pieces of legislation that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So again, these are for funding sustainability initiatives and their implementation, as well as spurring technology innovation. So we have the Inflation Reduction Act. That act passed in, I think, August 2022. It provides $374 billion to really serve as a catalyst for corporations to lead in the clean energy transformation. I don't know if you guys saw the panel a few panels ago, but I know they touched on the clean energy transformation. And it really makes existing pathways, more affordable for companies, and it also opens the door to new pathways with some of these innovations. And it's divided into 3 parts, again, just to kind of set the stage for you. It provides tax incentives for things like common renewables, as well as, again, this innovative technologies part like CCS and hydrogen, helping cement industry decarbonize, et cetera. Then there's also rebates and credits, more for your average American. So it allows people to put solar on their roofs and provides incentives there. It also allows for heat pumps, et cetera. And then the third bucket is federal programs. So it funds DOE's loan program. It also funds EPA's GHG emission fund, which is meant for low-income communities. So that's a quick, 101 on the IRA. And then I'll just touch on other 2 really quickly. The next one is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This act focuses on funding infrastructure projects, including things like transmission, EV infrastructure, resiliency projects, water infrastructure, et cetera. And then the last one is the CHIPS Act, which I'm not even going to tell you what that acronym stands for because it's too long. It's like creating happy, I don't know. But anyway, that is really meant to catalyze domestic manufacturing of semiconductors. And there are 3 areas of funding there, just quickly: R&D, workforce training, and financial incentives. So that's a little synopsis of some of the big things that are in the U.S. right now.
Minjia, you want to talk a little bit about the international scene?
Yeah, so talking about international scene, or kind of change this question a little bit at where can we get started when we talk about, we are interested in sustainability, legislation, policy, where do we get started? So I think there are a few buckets. So it applies to domestic and international. So I would encourage students to start with a global angle, looking at the international level treaties and principles. For example, Paris Agreement. It's not like technically a legally binding piece of legislation, right, in typical sense, but it's signed by so many signatory countries, and it sets specific target, and also, it specified the national level contribution by their signatory countries. And another principal level on, framework is definitely the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's 17 interconnected goals, but it's also important to look not only at the goal level, but also at targets level, which will give you more context of what are the specific, targets they're trying to reach. And then second tier, second bucket, I would encourage you to look at regional or national level framework guidelines. Again, they're not technically like a piece of legislation, but they're like guiding principles for a lot of regional and national level development. I would say EU's Green Deal laid out the framework or the groundwork, the principles for a lot of like the current legislation followed by this direction. The CSRD or like ESRS, SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, and a lot of other taxonomy regulation are all following this direction. And for China, we have our China 2030, 2050 national strategies. These are the national roadmap that will guide not only policy, but also investment to very needed sustainability projects. So for taking a look at Latin America, Mexico, early last year, they just launched by the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit, they just launched their first sustainable taxonomy. Yet again, it's not legally binding yet, but it's going that direction. And we have seen, again in the history how Mexico and Colombia's legislation, their guidelines influenced the entire Latin America. So it's also another really important framework to pay attention to. And then I would say the third tier are definitely like the local and national level laws. And in addition to, these laws, also pay attention to stock exchanges. There are over 100 stock exchanges in the whole world, but not every stock exchanges will mandate ESG disclosure. However, there are like quite a lot that are already taking this trend. As I mentioned, 3 stock exchanges in mainland China are proposing this direction. Hong Kong Stock Exchange, probably one of the very first stock exchange in the whole world, made ESG disclosure mandatory, and not only the environmental pillar, but it's really environmental, social, and governance. So very holistic approach. And this trend has been really prevailing, especially in Asia or like Asia Pacific region, looking at Bursa in Malaysia, also a leading stock exchange there, also made ESG mandatory for listed companies both in the main market and in their ACE market. And looking at Indonesia, also a very similar trend. Looking at Singapore Stock Exchange, they're also taking a phased approach to making ESG mandate. And then Japan Security and Exchange Commissions there are also like going that route. So there are, in addition to the national or regional level policies, take a look at how stock exchanges impact the behavior, the operation, and the transparency for listed companies, and that's an interesting trend to pay attention to. And I would say the last 2 buckets are probably, if I divide other voluntary standards, voluntary sustainability standards into 2 buckets, I would say the first one would be standards like TCFD, because they're getting closer and closer to be, recognized by different legislations, right? So it's almost like a key success for voluntary sustainability standard setters to be included directly in legislation. So they set specific, disclosure requirements or targets, and it's very important to pay attention to. And last but not least, it's those voluntary standards that haven't been adopted fully into legislation yet, but they're also very crucial because they kind of supplement regulation in a way to supplement the vagueness in especially the first few drafts of regulation. Because when we talk about disclosure without specific targets, how do I actually implement that? Then you need standard setters to come in to tell you, hey, this is the type of certification you can pursue. This is the type of standards with specific targets and roadmap that you can pursue. So it's just like an overview of what's happening in the world and what are the ways you can, consider and, learn about regulation.
Yeah, I mean, so many layers, and it's really interesting also to see sort of the objective of the different legislations, the policies, and you can tell the difference between, say, what's going on in the EU, what's going on in the United States, that there's differences in those objectives. So let's talk a little bit about where sustainability policy and sustainable finance intersect. So, Minjia, does that intersection, does it lead to more innovative and effective financing mechanisms to fund sustainability projects? What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course, like following up on, the answer to the previous question, if we can, I think I will offer two lenses for audience to think about where do they intersect. One lens is disclosure. So disclosure requirements do not necessarily lead to a clear or quantitative targets. Their goal and purpose, oftentimes, especially when you're looking at all those EU legislations, right? They usually say, provide me with your transition plan. But like, what does that entail? Like, what are the specific targets? They stop there. So these type of legislation lead to, I would say, indirect impact to finance. They have the sustainable finance goal, which is to drive capital towards more and better sustainability project, but they don't usually drive the capital there. They say you need to be more accountable. They say here's the classification system of how I consider whether your fund or your company meet the sustainability label, right? So this tier of legislation or regulation lead to indirect impact to sustainable finance, more on improving the quality, improving the transparency and accountability. And the second type, I would say, are, Nina, exactly as you said, directly drive capital. So like in terms of tax breaks, in terms of the credits, in terms of providing subsidy, these are more direct investment. And in a lot of countries, I think especially back to the Asia Pacific region, a lot of the green bond issuance are led by municipalities or even national government. So that's a very good case to show the intersection between policy or government's responsibility and how they drive financing to the private sector. And one example I like to raise, because I do spend a lot of time in the China and the Hong Kong China market in particular, I remember seeing the first case of different clients incorporating our own standard called WELL standard, as a social dimension or social KPI as early as 2017, 2018. And that time is also exactly the time when Hong Kong government started to pay attention and incentivize businesses to pursue green finance, to pursue green bond in particular, and they're positioning Hong Kong as the green finance hub. So in that period of time, there's a lot of, ESG mandate, ESG disclosure requirement led by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange to make it mandatory, but also followed by what we call the second bucket, which is government providing direct subsidy, providing direct tax benefit. And in terms of, bond or loan issuance, it's more favorable interest rate for those issuers or borrowers.
Thanks, Minjia. And Stephanie, so in this intersection, right, between finance and policy, where are you still seeing friction? Where are there still pain points?
I think there's quite a few pain points still. One of them in particular is about data, the availability of data and data quality. Another piece is about siloing sustainability. I don't know if siloing is a verb, but it is now. Sustainability and not really integrating it throughout your company in order to meet these regulations. So I think those are two of the big pain points that I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's still a lot of work to be done. And that leads into the next question, which is, for businesses, as I said, been doing this for a long time, and this balance between impact and profitability can be really challenging for businesses to find that proper balance. So Stephanie, let's start with you. Do you have any best practices to share for how businesses can approach finding this balance?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, to start off, it's my position that companies must focus on impact and sustainability in order to achieve a competitive advantage. And they can achieve that competitive advantage by reducing costs, enhancing reputation, attracting talent, mitigating risk, that's a big one that we're talking about now, opening new markets, and really driving innovation and product differentiation. And to successfully do this, I think that companies need to focus on a few things. First, I'm going to repeat again the integration of sustainability throughout your company. That is very important. It is everyone's job, no matter what your hired position is, to focus on sustainability and make sure that that is part of what you are doing. I think it's also very important to engage internal and external stakeholders, listen to what they're saying, and really embed that into the decision-making process. You also want to implement efficiency measures to reduce waste and to reduce resource use. And I recommend don't be afraid of using technology to do this. Technology can and should be your friend if used correctly. Also, when we're talking about technology, focus on innovation, right? Innovation to develop those sustainability products and services. Also aligned to what we were saying before, another important part is the reporting, tracking your progress, and being transparent. A company cannot be successful in focusing on impact and sustainability and profitability without that. Collaboration is another key area, right? We don't have on our own enough resources, both expertise and financial, to do this on our own. So we need to collaborate. And then finally, I will say that we need to focus on the long term, right? Sustainability is a long-term play. You can see short-term returns, but you also need to think about the long term to make sure that your business is still thriving X years from now. I'll give maybe two quick examples of companies that I believe are doing a good job with this. The first one is a company that I've been following for a while. They're called Bold Reuse. They are based on the West Coast of the US, and their mission is to end single-use waste by making reuse easy. And they really focus on every step of the reuse journey. They start with providing the containers for reusable food, et cetera, when you go to carry-out restaurants. Then they do the sanitation, they do the logistics, and then they focus on the strategy and the data collection as well. So it's really end-to-end. And if you look at their website, one of the first things they talk about on the website is the importance of collaboration. They talk about all of their different stakeholders that are involved to make this happen, and that it couldn't be possible without all of them together. And again, they have integrated sustainability directly into their mission. They are reducing waste and emissions, and they're also grounded in that innovation and technology. So I think that's a really good example. I'll give one other quick one, and that's in the fashion industry. I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about this really, really innovative company. I don't know their name, but they're focused on custom clothing in order to reduce waste. So they do 3D printing of their actual material, like to make the clothing. And in doing that, they reduce their pattern waste tremendously. And because it is custom made, then they don't have inventory, like they don't have the seasonal inventory. And they also have drastically decreased return percentages because the clothes fit the people. And then they take back the clothing at the end, and it's made of material that is very easy to recycle, and they put it right back into their next product. So it's a very closed loop and innovative system. They do say that it's cost competitive. I haven't done research. I don't know what that looks like, but it's worth looking into.
That's a great example. I listened to the same podcast, yes, and I immediately thought, that's what I want my closet to be. I want to wear the clothes, throw them back in the closet, it grinds them up, and makes me a new set of clothes that I
rent the runway and that.
Exactly.
Printing. That's
great. And also what you said, it's we always say sustainability is a team sport. It takes so many people at our organization to feed in, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to be in it for the long haul. And Minjia, how about you? Do you have any examples you'd like to share?
Well, as I already mentioned Grameen Bank in the lightning round, so I'll go back to this as one example to share and also provide some suggestions from the social perspective. And I think my suggestion for businesses to navigate this, constantly evolving policy or financing environment is to spend time with communities, spend time and effort, get to know the people you are impacting, the people you are serving. Listen to their needs and just be there to observe. That might inspire you to have really innovative solutions. So going back to the Grameen Bank case, before I arrived in Dhaka in 2013, all I read about, this bank was also from papers, from research about how they have this model to lend money to the poor, especially the women. But I didn't know until I lended, until I actually spent time in the village with different stakeholders for the bank to understand the way they were able to remove the collateral requirement from loan was because of really deep observation of how communities function, how what's the gender difference, how men and women behave in that specific social and cultural context, how women are found to be more reliable when it comes to taking on the responsibility for the household, taking care of their children, of their husband, and also when it comes to financial management, when they're giving this opportunity to have a loan, they usually use it in a more responsible way. So it's a lot of observation, and even the operation, it's not just in Dhaka in the headquarter level, it's spread out the rural areas. It currently covers over 80,000 villages. They have all the different district and then zone, and then under zone, there are different villages. They have operation in all different tiers to make sure that they understand the dynamics and make sure that they also help form the community groups for different women who all borrow a loan or to supervise each other. Because the network help. When you have one accountable person, you put them in a group, and that's even better. So Grameen Bank was able to, not only grant loans to over 45 million people, with the majority of women in that country, but also ensured an over 96% of repayment rate. So that's a great example. And it's not a new example. It's always an inspiration example to see how, one economic theory, adding a lot of efforts and time and efforts with, advancing community engagement can lead to a national practice, and how profit can be balanced with purpose.
It gets me so excited. It makes me feel so optimistic to hear, about these examples of innovation, because that's really where we're going to find those solutions. These innovative approach, even if it's an evolution of an existing theory. But let's talk a little bit about innovative structures. So public-private partnerships can really be powerful drivers of sustainable development. Stephanie, what approaches or collaborations between private sector and government exemplify the successful integration of finance and policy for sustainable development?
Yeah, sure. I think there are a lot of examples. So we really need systems change across industry and sectors. And one way to start achieving that is through partnerships, and public-private partnerships in particular. So I'll just give a few examples. The first one is very recent. Google, they just announced a partnership with the US Department of Energy. It's $35 million, where they are purchasing $35 million worth of carbon removal credits to match DOE's carbon removal purchase program. And this is to try to advance the voluntary carbon markets and really scale that sector. Another example, I mentioned earlier, the DOE Loan Office. This program is really intended to bring products to market, to bring them from R&D to commercial market. And they're very well known for actually funding Tesla's Model S, getting that out into the marketplace and scaling it. But right now, they have billions of dollars from the IRA. And so one example from this is they just gave out $9.2 billion to Ford and a battery manufacturer in order to bring the manufacturing supply chain of batteries to the US for mass adoption. So that's another really great example. Also, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the First Movers Coalition. This is a global public-private partnership. It's between governments, nonprofits, and companies. And the idea is to leverage these large companies' purchasing power in heavy emitting sectors, such as aviation, aluminum, steel, and work on decarbonizing these sectors. There's one other example that I wanted to mention, which is actually not a public-private partnership, but it's a private-private partnership. And I think it's an interesting example also. So Apple partnered with a company that uses zero carbon processes to manufacture aluminum. As you know, Apple uses a lot of aluminum in their products. And so Apple put in a lot of money to this company, and they received the first batch of this aluminum. But then their input of this capital had a ripple effect to other industries. So Audi was able to get the second batch of this aluminum in the car sector, something they never would have been able to do if first Apple in the tech sector, didn't put up this fund. So I think that's another really good example of partnerships.
That's a great example. I love that example. And Minjia, how about you? Do you have any examples you want to share?
Yeah, Stephanie shared a lot of great examples. I think I'll just quickly shed light on the concept of the social license to operate for business, because I think that's one part that government and the private sector can collaborate and do more together. Because in addition to just launching those rules and regulations, make like sustainable finance more transparent, make companies' sustainability reporting more transparent, and direct capital towards good sustainability project. What else government can do more is to really facilitate the dialogue between the private sector and the civil society, or the private sector, civil society, and the local communities they're impacting, to help business really get that social license to operate. Because oftentimes when we're talking about foreign investment in a lot of those developing countries, developed countries provide people, labor and capital in, but then there's not a cultural fit. They don't understand the local communities, how the business impact them, and they might be speaking different languages and looking at future in a different way. So how can government better facilitate that process? And so companies are not just, we are in compliance with this rule, we spend this much money, we spend this much labor, but you're also proactively getting the approval from the local community to have this social license to operate.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been a great conversation. We're running short on time. I want to leave a little bit of time for some questions. But before we open it up for Q&A, any thoughts or suggestions for those folks in our audience who would like to pursue a career in policy and finance? Stephanie, you want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to. Do it. Policy and finance are both very important levers in sustainability. And there's always need for subject matter experts in sustainability policy. I don't think there's enough people that do this work. Also, when you enter the workforce, really remember the importance of collaboration to understand and solve these multidisciplinary challenges. And look to profit by solving the world's problems rather than creating them. We need to move bigger and faster to solve the climate change crisis, and we do need all of you to be the leaders to help with that.
100% agree with everything Stephanie just said. Just adding a couple more points. I think sustainability subject is emotional and should be emotional. We shouldn't be just looking at climate change environment from how much carbon emission did we reduce? What's the type of renewable energy are we investing? It's also about humanity. So adding that social lens or have the belief that environmental and social should thrive hand in hand, or our planet and people should thrive together is really important. And during that process, you will get emotional when you start to feel the pain of the vulnerable populations, when you start to understand what they are going through in this climate change crisis, in this humanity crisis, in this public health crisis. You have a lot of feelings, and let your gut feelings guide you in your career, in your professional studies, and don't be pushed away, because when you're entering the workforce, you might be pushed away to do the easy thing, do the quick thing. For example, financial materiality, that's easier to do. So be mindful of what type of value you are going after or you're pushed into, and be the one to proactively prove the ROI, prove the business case of sustainability, instead of being the one just asking, so can you show me the ROI? I need to present to my investor. I hope you feel the emotion. I hope you feel the urgency to drive sustainability.
Amen to that. I mean, as I have to chime in there as well, because as we move from a voluntary reporting environment into a more compliance-driven environment, remembering what's behind those numbers when they're sustainability numbers is so important. You know, we're not just talking about dollars, we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about our planet, and you just have to keep bringing yourself back to that, like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the future. So thank you both so much. Anybody out there have any questions in the last little bit of time we have here?
Last 20 seconds.
Oh, we got to get up?
In your last 20 seconds.
12.
I would say for the last 20 seconds, let's do this one.
Okay, here we go. We're going to do this one. Okay. What podcasts related to sustainability do you recommend? Minjia, you want to start?
Well, I really enjoy listening to my friend Paul Alice's Sustainable Finance podcast, because I remember, long time ago, Paul was giving business card in those impact investing forums, and then he turned this little podcast practice into really a great convening platform for sustainability leaders to share their thoughts. So highly recommend that.
Yeah. I have so many. I'm trying to think of them right now, but ESG Insider is one. Politico Energy, just because those are really short clips. You can listen to them, very quickly. I think they're 5 or 6 minutes long. I think those are my top 2 right now.
All right, and I have to put in a plug for Columbia Energy Exchange, which I listen to religiously.
Agree.
All right, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Minjia.
Yeah.
You can always catch up with us later.